Hey, it's a Friday evening. It's 6 p.m. PST, 9 p.m. EST. It is Burns and Holla. Thanks so much for joining us. We are. I'm solo tonight. Terry, my normal co-host, is he is actually at a business seminar, and I find that actually kind of impressive. So that's what he's doing, and so tonight I have a guest that I've been wanting to talk to really for the better part of my life, to be honest. Larry Livermore, whose book, if you haven't read it, you should, How to Ruin a Record Label. And the record label that I'm talking about is Lookout Records. And I have to say, Larry, probably 1 in 3 records that I bought during my record buying days was a Lookout release. So thank you for putting all that stuff out.
You've given up the habit then of buying records?
Actually, during this pandemic, I've started the habit once again, just because it's been a joy. It's been a joy to have something like that show up in the mail.
I know people have done that. I'm not one of them, but a couple of my neighbors are doing likewise. That one of them even bought a record player, and now posting pictures of himself setting the needle down and playing a record. It looks almost sensual.
Yes, it does feel that way. I guess it's rediscovering that connection with the music that you can only have with physically putting a needle on a record, because we're not getting as much human connection. So you strive for any sort that you can muster.
Well, yes, we're not getting much at all. Well, I guess it depends on people's situation, but yeah, I've been pretty isolated for, about 9 months now.
Yeah. Yeah,
I was overseas when the epidemic started, and I was in Singapore, and it hit there first, although not as severely, but it was already an issue way back in January and February there. I came back to New York at the beginning of the summer, and we're still a
mess.
Not in the greatest. It was a lot worse before I got here, I'll have to say that.
So when exactly did you get back to the city?
It was the first week of June, and I had been in Singapore up till that time, where ironically things were starting to improve in Singapore, because they have a sort of a different philosophy, unlike America.
Mm-hmm.
They say, well, it looks like everybody needs to wear a mask and take certain precautions, so you're going to do it. It's none of this, well, your freedom, you can decide if you want to or not to, like the germ or the virus is going to decide. Well, he's just exercising his freedom of choice, so I'm not going to infect him.
Yeah, I've seen the Constitution injected quite a few times, which is sort of interesting to think that the founding fathers were trying to protect your right to shop at a Target without meeting any sort of demands.
Strangely enough, though, that same Constitution never stopped them from saying, okay, under penalty of getting locked up in prison for 5 years, you have to go off and be in a war and get shot at. It seems a little more inconvenient than wearing a mask, but who am I to say?
Well, let's talk about you and some of the things that you go over in your book, Larry. I mean, this is why I wanted to have you on. Lookout Records. It's as in the 90s. It's so interesting that you when it came to labels, and I don't know if you can say this so much today, there was just so much trust in the curators of the music of that label, whether it be Lookout or Fat or any of the other Dr. Strange. You believed that even if you hadn't heard the artist, because at that time the only way you could have is if you just took a chance on them or they happened to tour in your town. But you were able to build this trust with your audience that, like, okay, you're from the East Bay, this band's from wherever, but I promise you're going to like them.
I think we were in kind of you're right in general about labels, but I think we were maybe even in a more special situation, partly because it was not just me they were relying on, or my original partner, David Hayes, or my subsequent partners, Chris and Pat, but I think in people's minds we represented a whole scene, and in a very real sense we did. It was very informal, because we didn't start out as much like a business as some of the other labels did. We
Mm-hmm.
never expected to actually make any money. We were just hoping not to lose too much money. And so it was kind of basically, if you were part of the Gilman East Bay scene and you weren't like completely ridiculously terrible, and even in those cases, sometimes they would stand in your way, you kind of were automatically on the label if you wanted to be. And I think people sensed that. And especially, and I think some, credit goes out to my original partner, David Hayes, but I think maybe to myself too, because we kind of connected with a different group of punk rockers than the labels who were already around at that time. I'm talking about the mid to late 80s. By that time, punk was pretty well established and kind of getting old and moldy in a lot of ways. It was kind of very, I don't know. I always thought of it as like when we came along, we were appealing like to the 14, 15, 16-year-olds who were tired of listening to their big brother tell them what to listen to, and they wanted to
Right.
So not just music, but imagery of their, like our ads, our catalogs, everything was very amateurish and almost childlike, but it was the kind of humor that young kids, it appealed to them, and also they could say, yeah, this is something that is mine, not grumpy old big brother or dad telling me about back in my day what real punk rock was.
Right.
So
back
it was
in 77, you didn't even know.
It was kind of reinventing the whole thing. I mean, that's what Gilman was like, and I think to the extent that we reflected what Gilman was like was the extent to which we succeeded. I can't claim any particular genius on our part. It was just we were lucky enough to be there and be part of an amazing scene that was. I mean, there were amazing scenes all over America, but this particular one, for some reason, just kind of caught fire. And
well, Larry, let me bring in one of the imports to that amazing scene that you were talking about. Dan Vapid joins us, who was one of the people that you had signed that wasn't from the East Bay. There were Screeching Weasel was from Chicago.
One of the earlier ones, actually, Screeching Weasel were one of the first non-California bands that we worked with. And before we go on, let me say hi, Dan. It's great to see you.
Hey, Larry.
Last time we met, we were gallivanting around the continent back in the days when Americans were allowed to travel the world.
Yeah. The last time I talked to you, the world was much different.
We were at the Bergamo Punk Rock Raduno Festival in northern Italy, one of the places which sadly has been hit hardest by the virus outside of America, that is.
I did want to ask that. So you two get along?
Do we get along?
Yeah, we get along.
I had a fist fight in, I think it's been at least a year or more. Is that right, Dan? When's the last time I punched you out?
Yeah.
Or had to give you a good telling off. I think
we get along just fine. I don't know. Did you
hear
something or?
I don't think Dan and I have ever had a really serious argument. Maybe a little bit of a misunderstanding back in the 90s, but that was probably because we did not get a chance to communicate as much directly, because the boss of Dan's band was usually the one that did all the communicating, and he would get annoyed if I ever talked to any of the other members of the band separately.
Is that a fair characterization? Dan was Ben Weasel the boss?
Yeah, I mean, like with that band, him and the person to not be named here, they would do most of the talking. But I never really remember having any disagreement even with you, Larry. I don't know, maybe I did, but nothing comes to mind.
I can't recall, and we worked
either
on a number of projects, not just with that band. I remember being in the studio when you were playing with the Queers for a while too, and I think we had a fair number of philosophical discussions and political discussions. Just generally, I always had a great deal of admiration for Dan, and that admiration has only increased with the years. he kind of. I'm sorry for it sound like I'm talking about you when you're in the room, Dan, but
It's like a eulogy.
Give me the.
there was this image that again
courtesy to
somebody
least
tried to
talk
put
behind
forth
my
that
back.
Dan was kind of just the plug-in guitar player or bass player that he didn't have much to say for himself, and so it took a while until Dan came into his own, and then I was like, whoa, that guy is got a lot to say. He's a smart guy, and every time I talk to him now, I find out some new stuff. It's always a pleasure.
Yeah, some people suck the oxygen out of the room. I'm not going to name names or anything, but sometimes you just can't get a word in edgewise, and
were you comfortable with that though, Dan?
No.
Did it bother you at the time?
Yes,
it did.
Yes.
So you obviously Screeching Weasel is what we're talking about. That was Ben's show.
If
but
you
then
want to talk about that, yeah.
I think we should
talk about it.
Well, sure. Then because large
have either of you guys ever read Harry Potter?
Yes, all of them.
I started reading Harry Potter and then I put it down, and then that was that. I never.
Did you get far enough, Dan, to remember where they had at the beginning? Harry was living under the stairs.
How vaguely.
Yeah. Harry's summer sucked. Like he would leave Hogwarts as a hero wizard and then have a terrible summer.
When I first met Dan, that's kind of the impression I got, was like he was living with Ben, and Ben would be like, "Go to your room." Only it was like the closet under the stairs, where it's like if you don't have anything to say, just and that was my first time meeting Dan, and I was like, huh, that seems weird. But at the same time, Dan was very young, and I figured,
well, the first time that I met you, Larry, was in we played with you guys and Green Day.
Right, out in Gilman, and then
it was up at your house in the mountains. So
that was the second time. First time was when you played with Operation Ivy at
No, I wasn't. Yeah, that was before.
Oh, you weren't in the band yet.
No, I wasn't. I didn't play with the band yet. So
the first time that you played with us was up in the mountains in Garberville. It was the legendary show with Screeching Weasel, Green Day, the Lookouts, and the Mr. T Experience that lost because everybody went to see Jerry Garcia instead.
Yeah. Jerry Garcia was playing down the street, and it took away.
That's some odd counter programming. Yeah.
And but afterward, this is when I lived up on top of the mountain. It was about 10 miles off the highway in genuine wilderness, totally off the grid. And after the show, the bands followed me up there to crash. And it was, I think, for the city people, it was kind of a little bit scary because no street lights, no nothing.
I was scared.
You weren't scared? Well, I'll tell you who
was scared.
Oh, were you? Because Billy Joe and Mike were sleeping in.
Yeah, it's creepy out there, man.
There was literally no lights at all. You could not see a sign of another human being for as far as. But Billy Joe and Mike were sleeping in their van, and my dogs were barking, and they could not see the dogs, who were just, just cute little puppies who their only function was to bark and try and scare away bears and stuff. But Billy and Mike the whole night were terrified to get out of the van because they thought the dogs were going to eat them. But I think Dan got to sleep in the house that night.
I slept in the house. No, I remember that very well. It was very scary going up that mountain.
Well, your driver complained in his Maximum Rock and Roll column. What kind of asshole lives 9 miles up the side of it?
All right, Dan. So let's get into a little bit because I didn't realize just because you ended up forming another band with them that you kind of felt that sort of toxicity with the relationship between you and Ben.
Sure.
So a bit like how bad was it? Because you did stick around for quite a while.
Yeah, I mean, we had a lot of falling outs, and then with the Riverdales, it's really a long story, but it came down. He said that that I needed to stop drinking, and he said it was a problem. I said okay, You know, and I talked to a lot of friends of mine about it. They're like, you know, yeah, you like to have a few. Do I think you have a problem? No. You know, I asked my brother, no, you don't have a problem. My mom and dad, no, you don't have a problem. I don't think I had a problem. The only person that thought I had a problem was Ben. So it made me a little sour. And I'm not saying like he was necessarily wrong, but like, how do I put this? It was like he was overreacting, I think, you know, and like he saw everything as a problem. You know, if you're having a bunch of drinks, then it's a problem. You know, everything was always a problem with him, you know. So it was just something that got blown out of proportion in my view. And you know, I ended up getting pushed out for it. You know, because he said you either quit drinking or you're out of the band. I said, all right, well then I'm leaving.
Well,
So
I don't know if you remember, Dan, but I was the one that was charged with telling you that. I was giving you a ride back from Lafayette up to Chicago.
But let's face it,
He
that's not
told
really
me
what it was about.
Sorry,
What
he told me.
what that whole thing was really about was pushing me out to get Mike Dirt in the band. I mean, anybody that like is going to be honest with themselves, that's what it was about. You know,
He wanted someone from Green Day in it.
What can we hold over this guy's head so I can get like a real big name in here to sell some records? And that's what he did.
Well, honestly,
that's what I thought then. And that's what I think now. And there's nothing ever going to convince me of anything else. So, but be that as it may, you know, when we got the Riverdales together, you know, we had a talk, and he said, I need to know that you're okay with this, that we can move forward. And I said, yeah. So my view was like, all right, I'm going to try to put the past into the past, and I want to try to move forward. But the problem is that the old stuff kept creeping up again, and I found out that I couldn't let go of the past necessarily because it kept creeping into the present, like over and over again. So we kept having like falling outs and stuff like that. So so that's kind of where that whole thing is stemmed on.
But it seems like you kept trying to make it work because the Riverdales would go on hiatus. So there was obviously there was some chemistry when it came to just performing.
There was a really lot of chemistry between the two of us. I mean, I can honestly say like when he showed me like Anthem for a New Tomorrow, I had half the record like with bass parts and backing vocals in like 3 or 4 hours. You know, he was just showing me songs and we were going back and forth. And it was really, I felt like, I just kind of intuitively understood where his writing, like I kind of knew where he was going to go with the song, and like kind of I knew what to add to it, I felt like. So that was really hard. And, another thing that was really tough for me back then was just, he had gone to a drug rehab, and my older brother had went to a drug rehab, and he like lived like a couple towns over for me. And like, he kind of seemed like the big brother like I never had, like I felt like in some ways, I felt like, God damn, I felt a little let down by my own family in certain aspects where I felt like he was coming down and he was kind of looking over me, kind of taking me under his wing and kind of showing me things. And as time went on, I found out a lot of it was really just toxic, so it's a really weird thing because in some ways I have a lot to thank him. In other ways, I don't,
But
it's a really difficult situation. Yeah, go ahead, Larry.
Yeah, I got that impression too. And when I first knew you, I did feel like, you were not that much younger than him, but you seemed younger. And it did feel like he was taking an older brother, almost fatherly interest in you and helping you make the transition out of your family's home into the world and helping you, in general, I thought.
Yeah.
And I don't want to judge the guy. I think to some considerable extent, his motives were probably good, and you were doing good work together. But
yeah, for sure. Like that's the thing about this. I don't want to like say that everything was bad about our relationship. It wasn't.
No, not.
There was a lot of really good and positive things, but in the end, the bad outweighed the good.
Well, this is what I was going to say in my own experience. Bands are a lot like romantic relationships or marriages, and the rewards can be extremely great, but so can the price you pay for them. And for a lot of people will stay in relationships a lot longer than they might think that was wise, because they're getting something out of it, or because they used to get something out of it, and they're hoping it will come back again. And there's no denying that both bands made a lot of really great music, and that there was some really great chemistry there. It's just, how do you know when it's time to walk away? Everybody has their own kind of breaking point. They're saying, well, this is too much, so this is just not worth it anymore. And that's you can't really judge. It's kind of like saying to a man or a woman, why don't you leave your partner when you know that it's a terrible relationship? Yeah, but I want to give it another chance. You can't really judge somebody else's situation.
Yeah, they have to come to the realization on their own. And I guess, Dan, was there a particular moment, because we are going to talk about everything you've done since, because you have quite a catalog, but was there a specific moment you're like, I can't work with you ever again?
There was a lot of things leading up to South by Southwest, and the South by Southwest thing was kind of like the last.
I was just going to say that the famous hand gesture.
I know there was like the infamous hand gesture and all that, but it wasn't.
It still gets retweeted all the time.
For years that was building up, and like I said before, it was like a lot of stuff was stuff from when I was like pretty young, and there was a whole history, and it was all on my mind. Even that night when he did punch that woman on stage, like everything just flooded me. Like, for years, and I was like, I can't do it. Now, technically, he did fire me, but it doesn't really matter in my view. Like I just.
Well, it seems like he had to pretty much recruit.
So it doesn't matter.
He had to get a whole new gaggle of people to play. I know it's still called Screeching Weasel, but it's just it's Ben's band. It's basically solo projects.
Yeah, for sure.
There are a number of bands like that, classic Lookout bands that are basically one person, only one.
Mr. T Experience,
yeah.
And the Queers,
But
can I say one thing? Like, I don't want to make this podcast about bagging on Ben Weasel.
I didn't intend that either.
It's like I said, and I think it's important, and like what I was saying earlier is that there are good things as well. And so like take that for what it's worth, and but I want to be as candid with you as I can as well.
Well, it's sort of one of the thematic elements of this podcast, Dan, is that to an extent we're all morally compromised. None of us are 100% great or 100% evil. We're somewhere in between.
Right.
So I appreciate your honesty about it, but also realizing that you guys, the two of you essentially created some music that defined, certainly a lot of my youth, and, that you realize that as well.
Cool. I appreciate that.
But what the first episode I did with, we're just doing a couple of punk shows here, had Cody from Teenage Bottle Rocket, Mass from Sonic Iguana, and the Dolly Rots. The Dolly Rots are just goddamn joyful. They're just two like the most upbeat people. They're like human lollipops. They're just so. But I asked them the same question. 2020 is an unprecedented year in so many ways, and punk is usually supposed to be sort of somewhat a reflection of the times. Sometimes,
right?
What role do you think punk, if it has any role anymore, has in 2020?
You want to answer that, Larry? Or you want me to answer that?
I've been kind of bagging on punk for about 30 years now, saying it's like, come on, who takes that seriously anymore? I mean, my own history goes back like 40, even 50 years if you count the MC5 and the Stooges. And so it constantly amazes me that people still get bent out of shape about, well, is this really punk, or what is the future of punk? Or honestly, to me, it feels like at this point mostly nostalgia for older people. Like punks always like to talk about what the kids will like, but the kids have been listening to EDM and K-pop and stuff for years now. You go to a typical punk show, you're not going to see a lot of actual kids. I mean, that was the difference at Gilman Street. The place was practically run by kids. There was like a 14-year-old who would run the whole shows on some nights. There was sometimes a 20-year-old be the oldest person in the place, and yet it worked. But all those people are now in their 40s and even 50s.
But Larry, do you think something changed, or is that just the cyclical nature of people's interests?
Well, because of my age, I've been through several countercultures already. I mean, I started out as a greaser in the 60s, in the late 50s. And that was my culture at that time. To me, I was going to be a greaser until I died. I mean, no, it sounds ridiculous now. And if you see a silly movie like Grease, which is I remember at the time getting really angry because they were destroying or mocking our culture. But honestly, we felt just as important about like our greased back hair, doing our leather jackets and our tight top pants and all that, as the hippies then did later about their bell bottoms and their long hair and their headbands and stuff. And the same with, in a few more years, then the punks, no, you're supposed to wear this and you got to wear this, and that kind of music is a sellout. The same kind of debates kept on going. The only thing that really changed was the style of music and the costumes. And the thing is, if you're gonna be a young person in 2020 and you want to rebel against society or forge a new direction culturally, are you going to go listen to the music that your parents and your grandparents listened to? I mean, in 1967 or 1977, we did not go seek out the Tommy Dorsey band or Frank Sinatra records or Benny Goodman, like my parents listened to. We made our own music. And I think that's what young people, that's what kids will always do. That's not to take away from, the people who are still playing in the style of punk rock, or to say that they can't still add more elements and inventiveness to it. Well, I'm working on a new book right now. I'm about halfway through it, and I'm just describing how meeting these guys in a record shop in England in 1992, when it was right after Green Day's first really big record came out on Lookout, and one of them was like a rocker, with the whole, he had a motorcycle and the greased back hair. It was kind of a little bit like the greasers we had in America. But, also like in Quadrophenia, the mods and the rocker. This was a full-on rocker, only like almost 30 years later. And I was like, dude, you're like a time capsule. You're like younger than me, but you're like 1964 come to life. And he goes, oh, right, but, we keep the culture alive. You all see my dad and his mates, they're still teddy boys from the 50s, except they haven't got much hair left to do their quiffs with. But but it made me see something different. In England, they do tend to preserve every counterculture. It's like archaeological layers of, you can find almost every kind of little scene that ever existed. In America, it tends to be more disposable. They kind of say,
sure,
you don't find many greasers from the early 60s around anymore. I guess there's me, but I don't really live true to the lifestyle anymore, and haven't carried a switchblade in about 40 years, but or more.
You can always bring it back, Larry.
Yeah, I considered it, but I did not think it was a wise lifestyle choice. So
it seems like a lot of work. Like greasers, almost more than anything. You got to be kind of a bad boy. You got to have a nice car.
My younger brother, who's 4 years younger than me, and who by the way is celebrating his birthday today, in case he's watching, happy birthday, Ken. He always took like this kind of jaundiced view of me, because I would always be the one who jumped on the latest craze. Ironically, he was the one that first told me about punk because he was in London in '76 and I wasn't around at the time. He was at Woodstock before I was. We both got there, but he was there days before and days after. And yet he would always kind of say, "Oh, Larry, you're always like, getting all carried away with these latest cultural fads. And, why don't you just take it a little bit easy?" And, finally, I kind of see his point, because I did. I was like, at first I thought the hippies were dumb and we should beat them up. The greasers should beat up the hippies, and we did. We go chase them around and saying, "Are you a girl or a boy?" A couple of years later, I got my own bell bottoms and I'm running around, "Peace and love. How about flower? What? Don't you want peace and love?" And then 10 more years, and I'm like going around with my boombox blasting and Ramones because I knew it annoyed the hell out of the hippies, and I was saying, "Why don't you guys go die?" And Jerry Garcia too. It was like each time I took it so seriously, and I
did that. Don't you think that? Because I agree with you, Larry. Like when I grew up a punk kid in the '90s, and I took it so seriously. Like anything that wasn't punk, immediately discarded. Like, you like Bob Dylan? Fuck that.
Yeah.
Now it
I was
seems
the same
completely
way
unreasonable.
in the '80s. Very.
It was punk or it was nothing.
And even in the early '90s, a very punk purist. And then it got to a point where I was just like, "This is stupid.
This is ridiculous."
I always liked a lot of stuff, but for whatever reason, you just kind of really feel loyal or really dedicated to like a certain scene or a certain kind of sound or whatever.
Right. And I don't know if that happens anymore. Like the "what is punk" thing definitely was a raging topic of. I don't think anyone really cares anymore.
Yeah.
I don't know if you ever heard of Facebook, but it's this people talk about things on there, and that's one of the things they continue to talk about. I was just going to add, though, I felt like we benefited, both my band, the Lookouts, also the label Lookout Records, and I think to some extent the Berkeley East Bay scene, by having both hippie and punk influences, because it was set us apart from especially the Lookouts, because we started in a hippie area where we're literally the only ones for 100 miles playing punk rock music. But we had a lot of hippie influences. Like our first demo tape, we had Bob Dylan and Rolling Stones and Velvet Underground covers, punk style, and also we had the ethos to do it yourself apart from society. I think that Berkeley had that kind of whole thing. We don't have to do it the LA way or the New York way, like to get on a major label, and that we can do it ourselves. We'll build our own clubhouse and we'll build our own record label. So I feel like we benefited a lot from, there's this, I don't know where I first heard this or if I made it up, but eclecticism is the mother of creative synthesis. The more influences you draw on, the stronger your culture becomes. Some people say that about America, e pluribus unum, because we had the blessings of people from all over the world and all these different cultural inputs. We developed our own American culture that was like unique, that there was nothing like it in the world. Unfortunately, nowadays it's kind of, people are turning inward and saying, "No, we don't want any more foreigners." But we were all foreigners, and that's what made the country what it is.
Larry, logically that makes sense, but I have to say I was completely anti everything you just said when I was a punk rock kid. Like, no, I don't want these other genre influences. Like your 3 chords, your 2.5 minutes, and that's it. And I again, obviously, I've grown since then. But now, Dan, to speak to your point, the most comforting thing I can do is go to a punk show, because it's the only place where I don't feel old and out of place. Like I feel like everybody's grown up with the music, and the people we like are still playing it, and the people that I was friends with are still listening to it. I think that's one of the great things about it, and why it still is not necessarily a thriving genre, but one that people are still interested in.
Yeah, it's special for sure. I mean, there's people I've known, like Larry, I've known since like the late '80s, and a lot of other people I'm just to this day I still talk with and relate to. And they came out of the punk scene. But you know, one thing I did want to mention when you were.
Oh, Dan cut out.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry.
No problem. Try again.
Larry, I think this is kind of an important point. Larry, wouldn't you say there's at some degree Green Day were influenced by hippie stuff? Because
absolutely,
yeah, they were very a hippie punk band. Because
well, Billy Joe was the youngest of several children and
Right.
of 6 children, and his older brothers are almost as old. His oldest brother is almost as old as me. So his early influences were not just hippie music, but his dad taught him to play the old standards,
like
like
the
30s and 40s.
Right, like the Rolling Stones and the Who and the Kinks, and like when I first met those back at your house, Larry, I remember thinking like, oh, these are kind of like the Burnouts I go to school with.
Yeah. I think they wrote a song about that, in fact.
Yeah. I mean, which is cool because like those were pretty much the people I hung around with, but
no punk ever wanted to admit that they smoked pot.
They didn't really seem that.
You're not from Berkeley,
No, I'm not. No, actually, weirdly, the big scene in where I grew up in southern New Jersey was straight edge hardcore. Oh, so if you want to find a more joyless scene than that, go ahead and try.
We used to make a lot of fun of that.
Brutal.
Yeah, to the XM Crucified. It was a lot of fun. People just get around and talk about how they would never drink forever.
And then 21.
Nobody stuck to it. Nobody. 21. I thought like third year or third day of freshman year of college. All like, right. I'll try a beer. But
yeah.
Dan, I want to talk about your post Riverdale's career. You've had the Mopes, the Methadones. My friend has a really funny. He used to work at a record store, and he put on the Methadones one day, and this like 75-year-old dude came in to buy God knows what, but not the Methadones. But you happen to be playing, and he went up to the register and he's like, "This shit is shaking my bones. What is this?" And
okay, next album title there.
And ended up buying a Methadones album, which is still one of my favorite, record store employee stories.
Nice.
And now you're doing, I don't know if the Methadones are still together because you had gigs scheduled, but they were canceled. Obviously,
yeah. Like we were supposed to play. We were going to do some reunion stuff. We got asked to do Raduno in Italy, and then the COVID thing struck. And
so, if a band is in the process of reuniting but it hasn't reunited, are they still active as a band?
Not really. I mean, there's not much you can do now. Can't play anywhere. Can't practice.
Right. And how much?
I don't live in Chicago anymore either. So like, it was the kind of thing where it's like, if we're gonna book some shows and play, that's fine. We got asked to, like I said, to do the festival, and we were all really excited about it. We're like, okay, that sounds like a lot of fun. Going to Italy. Italy's awesome, and and all that. But I mean, besides that, I don't think we're gonna really. We don't have any plans to do anything.
No.
I'm saying.
How much are you missing? Being out on stage and touring, or is because when I asked Cody from Teenage Bottle Rocket, he was like, yeah. I have to admit, for the first few months, this actually felt like a nice break. Do you feel that way, or are you just dying to get back out there?
I'd like to play again. Like it's I miss playing music. Like it's just even stuff like going to band practice. I miss. We haven't even done that, and like I just the area that I live in just kind of had a spike in COVID cases, and we were going to have a band practice and kind of distance with it. I was like, okay. Or I was going to go into the studio, and I thought about having a band practice, is what I should say. And it just kind of didn't happen. It just, I know it's just not the time. It's one of those kind of waited out. Hopefully,
I feel like
2021 we can come back, but I don't even feel great about that.
But at least like it's for some reason it feels like a new chapter. It just seems to be when I talk to creative people who mostly perform in front of others, they're just maybe if it had been May, they'd still be optimistic. But at this point, it's just like let's just hibernate and ride the year out, and not get together and try again on January 1st or January 20th.
Right.
Final question for you two. How are you occupying your time? I'm always curious to hear how people are not falling into the depths of madness.
Yeah, it's a great question. You go first, Larry.
I expect Dan has got his hands full between work and children. Just today I was talking with a bunch of other punk rock parents who are just like, how do we cope with this? Like, helping our kids do their learning remotely and all of that. My heart goes out to them and my hat goes off to them because, geez, I'm glad that there are devoted parents out there doing what needs to be done. I don't know if I could. I guess I would have to do it if I was in that position, but I'm not. As far as my own case, I spend a lot of time and have done for a long time. I spend a lot of time alone, working on my own stuff. So my big projects for the last 3 years, this will probably strike some people as a bit insane, but I have been studying languages, like a lot of languages. I probably about 2 to 3 hours a day is spent in studying several different languages and trying to become fluent. I haven't become fluent in any yet, but I'm making progress.
Like real languages, or are you doing like Dothraki stuff?
Yeah, just making languages up, like big Latin. Yeah. No, I originally started studying Chinese because back when we were able to, I visited China a lot. I'm trying to learn a lot about China and sort of serve as an intermediary, since there are a lot of crazy people in this country that seem determined to start a war with China over basically nothing or misinformation. And I feel like it's, I studied this in university too a long time ago, but I'm kind of a little bit familiar with their culture as well as our own, and I would like to be considered like the kind of guy that can build bridges between the place. But in order to do that, I got to know their language as well as our own, and it's difficult. But so I started studying European languages as a relaxation in between Chinese lessons because they're so much easier, and it's kind of weird, like at my age, who knows if I'm ever going to learn any of them well enough to travel the world fluently using them. But it's good for the brain to think outside of your own language. It's kind of like I used to think like we used to always be told in school that the world was round, but nobody ever really could quite grasp it until astronauts actually went out into space or on the moon and took a picture and say, yes, look, here's the world. It really is round. And from another perspective, you see it. Yeah, it's true. And that's kind of like when you get outside of English and start thinking in French or Chinese or Turkish or whatever, you say, oh, they think a whole different way. And now I understand a little bit better about how we think too. And it's pretty amazing. But the other thing that I do, which also takes up several hours a day, is I'm about midway through my next book, which will be my third and the final in a series. And in fact, probably tonight, I'm going to probably hit the halfway mark of finish the 12th chapter, about 50,000 words. And so that's pretty exciting too. I had been putting it off for several years. I didn't know if it was ever going to get written. And I would spend a lot of time each day telling myself what a lazy bum I was for not writing this book that I knew I had planned to write for years, and that had to be written. At least it felt important to me. And suddenly, about a month ago, I just said, "Oh, time to write." And I started writing. It's like 1,000, 2,000 words a day. And I said, geez, I wasted all that time and all that energy for the last few years yelling at myself for being a lazy bum, when all it was just a matter of taking it easy, waiting for the time to come. And when the time came, the writing is a joy. I'm hoping it will be a joy to read also, but we'll find that out in a year or two.
Larry, you're the first person who's actually described a scenario of self-improvement over these times. Most people are like, I work.
Agreed.
To make, so you know.
No, I mean, yeah, make the best of it for sure. I mean,
Theoretically,
if you're a writer, it's probably a pretty good time. It's like you know, it's a good time to just. You need solitude to be a writer. So I mean, you can't really go anywhere. So
yeah. Most answers I get, Larry, though, are like I wait for AM to turn into PM so I can pour myself a drink with less guilt, and then I watch True TV's World Dumbest Criminals until I take a nap, and then it's Thursday all of a sudden. So congrats to you for actually making use of this time.
Well, it's one thing as you get older, you either say, okay, my life's over and I might as well just wait to die, or you say, well, I've got a finite amount of time left and I might as well put it to some use. My mother was quite an inspiration that way. She was very intellectually and physically active right up until the day she died, which was 3 days before her 97th birthday.
Wow.
A couple hours,
that's a good run.
Couple hours before she died, she and I were on the phone. I was telling her about I was at the book launch for my second book, the one about the record label, and I was on the East Coast, and she was disappointed I wasn't there yet for her birthday, but we had a long couple hours chat, and you know, just lucid and clear-headed as ever. We talked about everything, and then a couple hours later, she just laid down, went to sleep, and that was that.
Wow.
But she never stopped living, and she used to always complain about what a lazy person she was too. And then in the weeks after she died, I had part of my job was to go around and tell all of the neighbors and the people who she dealt with and stuff who hadn't heard the news. And without exception, she was such a wonderful lady. She was always so helpful, always went out of her way to do something kind for you. I mean, it was like me being like the astronaut on another planet again. See, whoa, that was my mom. I knew she was pretty great, but I had no idea she was that great. And I got a long, long way to go. Well, maybe not a long, long way to go before I pass away, but certainly a long, long way to go before I'm anywhere near that great.
Well, you got to save us from a war from China with China first.
The idea that when I pass away, that people would have that many nice things to say about me as they did about my mom. That's kind of hard to imagine. I did a lot of asinine things for the first more than half of my life. So
well, that's why your books are good, because you did. That's why your books are good, because you did. You know, nobody grows up like, well, I made 30 years of good decisions. Here's my memoir. That would be boring.
Well, I've read books like that and heard records like that too.
I don't like them as much.
Yeah, but they're not as fun.
They're not as fun.
It's important to strike the balance. You know, I wrote a book once that was never published. It was kind of my whole life story in one very, very thick book, and it just wasn't the right time. I wasn't ready yet. But reading it afterwards, I'm like, oh my God, I just spent 400 pages just telling everybody how awful I was. And you know, I'm sure there are some people who might agree with that, but it got pretty monotonous. Even people who hated me probably would have got bored with it.
Yeah, there's songwriting versions of that.
Just people talking about what a piece of trash they are.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're all morally compromised. We're not 100% good or 100% bad. You just try it. You hope that you end up leaning on the good side.
Are you talking about G.G. Allen or Morrissey there, Dan?
Well, yeah. Oh, Morrissey. You just struck a nerve with bringing that name up. But
I used to admire him quite a bit. It's not very easy to do nowadays.
It's very difficult.
What did he do? Something that did I miss?
Several things.
He's been drifting farther and farther towards the right wing and the racist right wing for quite some time. And
really,
Yeah, I mean,
imagine if Alex Jones like presented the news like, and then today the FEMA camps are going to enslave you.
I
That's
had
like
no
basically,
idea of that.
Morrissey has gone pretty crazy.
I did not hear that at all.
Yeah.
no,
That's,
God, that's
and the music has not gotten better either. In fact, it's gotten considerably worse. The oddest thing was just recently I heard a tape of Johnny Marr performing Smith songs with him singing the vocals, and his vocals are not that different. I mean, they're not quite as distinctive and characteristic as Morrissey, but he's like, he can sing pretty darn well, and the songs sound great with him singing. I'm like, wait, we could have had all that music without Morrissey?
yeah, without Morrissey. Yeah, re-record everything.
He wrote all the lyrics, though, didn't he?
I believe he did. I was not there. I've been a lot of places, but that was one place I was not.
Yeah, I think that's what their fans really like the most about him.
Yeah,
well, it seems to me, but
I think there's just that. I mean, Morrissey's just one of those. They just bought into everything. You know, the rose in the teeth, or just the mopiness of it.
I've always liked him, but I've never loved him. You know, I'm in that camp. I'm like, good, not great.
Yeah. I guess he was just always sad for the sake of being sad type dude.
It's what it seemed like to me too.
Yeah.
Like they didn't have, I don't know, and all that to hear that he's like going right wing and all that. That's
disappointing. I'm not sure how much of it is right wing and how much of it is just kind of getting old and cantankerous and bitter. Quite a few people, including a lot of our old time punk friends, they get to a certain age, and a lot of times they don't necessarily believe some of the reactionary things they say. They just kind of say it just for the sake of talking, and they find out that it gets a reaction, so they keep saying it. And before you know it, they sort of semi-believe it themselves. I almost kind of saw the same thing in the 80s when a lot of punk bands used to kind of make fun of metal by playing like, look at this stupid metal song we're playing the jokes. Yeah. They would find out that they were kind of good at it and people liked it. So the next thing you know,
all of a sudden they're a metal band.
And that's kind of, the grumpy old man kind of punk scenario. I mean, it's almost like there's this whole section of old time punk bands with the angry lead singer that I don't agree with Trump, but he's got some good things to say. You got to admit.
Yeah, there was
freaking believable.
I forget what band that kind of had like this problem at the Warped Tour that had been around forever a couple of years ago.
That'd be the Dwarves.
And was it?
I think. Well, they got in some problems at the Warped Tour, I believe. I'm not sure. The Dwarves, I think it was.
I don't think it was the Dwarves. I mean, the Dwarves should have constantly been in trouble.
That other one, the one from Southern California, not.
I can't remember.
I mixed them up with the Toy Dolls, who were English, but it was not them either.
A notable act, but they were doing exactly what you said. They were just like, you kids need to buck up with, and just accept that Trump is president. I'm like, you're at the Warped Tour. This really isn't the time or place, nor are you making any sort of salient points anyway.
The funny thing is, I'm really surprised I'm in as good as mood as
the Dickies
as I am, considering Ruth Bader Ginsburg died today. Like, I almost didn't want to come on this podcast.
Honestly, Dan, I considered canceling it.
I was so upset. I'm like, I almost canceled on you, man.
I for more than a few minutes, I was like, I don't even know if I could do this because this is devastating.
It's good. Now,
no, but it's
it's getting my mind off of it for a little bit.
Yeah.
Well, that's good, but it's honestly, I've seen, I've been around a while. I mean, I have never felt like that our country, that our way of life was so in danger as it is right now, and I'm not completely optimistic that we get through it in one piece. I hope and pray for the best, but I'm not counting on it, and I hope that people who want to just slough it off, it's just politics, it's all just a game. No, it's not always just a game. And real people get hurt. Real people die when things go wrong.
Well, you know, and like another thing is like, you know, like we have a climate problem. We have climate change issues. You know what I mean? Like, is he going to give a shit if he gets reelected for the next 4 years? You know what I mean? I mean, that is a big issue. And
I think
he's not going to call it a hoax.
No, honestly, I've been watching this, and it seems so far-fetched, but I realize I believe almost beyond a doubt, the Republican program is to keep using as much oil as possible and forcing people to use as much oil as possible by preventing alternative energy development, because pretty soon oil is going to be almost worthless because alternative technology is advancing so rapidly in other countries. We
were kind of at that point earlier this year.
Yeah, if it weren't for all of the artificial stimulus that the Republicans are giving to the oil industry, oil prices would collapse completely already. And they're basically trying to pump as much carbon out of the ground and push it off on the marketplace as they can while it's still worth something. And, you know, I know that's very cynical, but remember, most of these people are very old. They're older than me, and they're not going to have to worry about the consequences. They're not going to have to live with it. Meanwhile, in China, they're phasing out the gasoline engine. Like by 2040, there will be no more gasoline-powered engines in China. They're at one time, California was the solar power capital of the world. I was living on California manufactured solar panels back in the 80s. When my band first started playing, we were using solar power manufactured right there in California. Then Germany took over, and now China, by far, is the biggest manufacturer of solar energy and wind energy in the world. You know, they recognized, I mean, they contributed greatly to the pollution problem, but when they recognized that, wait a minute, we can't live like this, they said, oh, that's the virtue of having an autocratic society. I mean, the good side of it is you can say, oh, we made a mistake, let's change. And they do. It's almost overnight. They switched their whole policy from carbon fuels to alternative energy.
Well, that's good that you said that, because I've always read the opposite, like they're like the, you know, creating the most pollution. And
well, because they're industrial standards. Their industrial standards are wretched.
When I first went to China already, yes, it was very polluted. And I said, you know what this reminds me of? It reminds me of the United States back in the 1960s and 50s, before we had the Clean Air Act and the Clean Water Act. It's basically characteristic of every developing society. England was the same way during their industrial evolution. They just like, oh, we're all getting rich. Who cares about the environment? And then they get rich and the environment is so terrible. Oh, wait a minute, this kind of sucks. Well, let's use our riches to fix things. And the United States went through this. England went through this. China is going through it now. But ironically, the United States is going backwards. It's like Trump is undoing all of the environmental progress that was achieved during the 60s and 70s and 80s. In 1970, late 1960s, rivers were catching fire routinely in the United States. There were many days when you could not see across the street because of the air pollution was so bad. Young people today will have a hard time believing that because they never saw it the way that I did. Mm-hmm. But already in only a few years, my first time in China, there were days like that. You could not see across the street. It hurt to breathe. My last time in China, which was just about a year ago, there were still bad days, but there was also many good days. It's clearing up. They got a long way to go, but they have the money and they have the will to do it. In this country, apparently, right now we've got none of that. We're broke.
Well, it's a big hoax, man. It's a big liberal hoax.
Yeah, we're really good at pranking. We prank you with the virus, prank you with climate change.
It's infuriating.
You wouldn't believe it. Yeah, but it's what Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and I don't know if you heard what some of her dying words is that she doesn't
appoint my successor.
Yeah, exactly. She wants to wait for the next president before her successor is appointed. She told her granddaughter that. And if this isn't a call to action for Democrats and to register to vote, to not be apathetic, then we probably deserve to lose.
I think Trump and McConnell were talking about this tonight.
Oh, I'm sure they were. Well, Trump was in Bemidji
and talking how they're going to ram it through.
Mm-hmm. I mean, McConnell's on tape saying that in an election year, because he blocked Merrick Garland.
Right,
in an election year, you should the will of the people should be heard. He said this on March 16th, 2016. But do you really think Mitch McConnell cares if people call him a hypocrite? No, he doesn't.
No, absolutely not.
They're definitely going to try to ram this. So all of a sudden, who the most important two people in the world become, at least the United States? Mitt Romney and Lisa Murkowski, because the two of them could block it. Will they though?
They need two more. They need four altogether.
Susan Collins has already said that she's not going to. She's not going to vote for a new. But she said that before RBG died, so it was a hypothetical at that point. She says now that's happened.
I believe they need
a lot of faith,
before though, because the vice president can break a tie.
I think that there's a fourth already. That who's the guy out of Nebraska? Ben Sass.
He's an extreme right winger, but he doesn't like Trump. Well, we'll see how that works out.
Yeah, either way, we kind of put ourselves in a bad situation. Thanks to everybody who voted for Jill Stein. You really did. You did a good job voicing your pleasure.
Especially my friends in Michigan and Wisconsin and Pennsylvania. You know who you are. Oh, I'm being principled. I can't vote for the lesser of evils. So I hate
the lesser.
Right. I can't tell you how many arguments I've had this year about that shit.
The lesser of two evils stuff.
I've had so many. They're so infuriating.
Yeah.
And now look, and stuff. And they never think about the Supreme Court, do they?
It's as important as the presidency, if not more. And nobody considers that.
They never think about it.
Everyone was just like, well,
the foresight.
You remember what the Supreme Court did in 2000? They picked the president.
They did.
Yep.
People don't think that could happen again.
Yeah. And Ruth Bader Ginsburg was a dissent on that vote. And the Democrats' plan was basically like, well, pshaw with Hillary, we'll just hope that Ruth Bader Ginsburg lives to be 88 despite her stage 4 metastatic pancreatic cancer. That was our plan going forward. But I try for a while. The show has always ended on a note of despair. And I'm trying to reverse that trend. Like, I don't want to requiem for a dream this shit every time. Marlon Wayans has no arm. Jennifer Connelly is a prostitute. Like, I want to always end up on a kind of an up note. So, Larry, you're almost done a second book. You're speaking different languages now. A third book. Sorry, Dan. Any output from you coming anytime soon? I know that you just had to cancel that band practice, but
I had started a record in October, and it just I was working on it, and then the whole COVID thing happened, and then it just kind of put everything to a halt. So when it gets comfortable again to kind of start again, I guess we'll start again. That's just kind of where I am with it. But I've been writing a lot of songs, but a lot of them are kind of 2020 inspired. But
isn't it hard not to?
But by the time they're out, it's going to be past it. The moment will pass. I don't know if people will relate to it anymore, but
it's weird. It's weird to create anything that doesn't address it, too, right?
I could not write some of these songs. They were just coming out of me, like whether I liked it or not.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it was like, and I typically don't write anything that's, people that know my songs, I typically don't go in that direction, but I just couldn't help it.
Yeah.
They were just coming out of me. And I felt like I got to say something here. But can't really do anything, I'm just going to sit on it until I can.
I did mean to ask you this earlier because your newest band is Dan Vapid and the Cheats. And I love bands that are blank and the blank, Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, Elvis Costello and the Attractions.
Uh-huh.
Why did you decide to, because
I want to know too.
Is it to just make it like, oh, everybody else is disposable, or is it, like why did you decide to call it Dan Vapid and the Cheats?
I decided to call it that because somebody wanted to book me like doing songs on like back catalog, and it was on a night where Screeching Weasel was supposed to play but had canceled, and a lot of people were already going to come into Chicago, and so I was approached by a promoter to play. Hey, would you want to, maybe do some songs, the Riverdales, the Mopes? I said, and I thought about it. I was like, oh, okay, I'll do it. And he's like, well, we got to call it something. I'm like, well, what are we going to call it? You know what I mean? So we just kind of had to come up with a name, and that was that. And so after that, once you have a name, then you're kind of stuck with it.
Gotcha.
You're still as honest as you've always been, right? You're not a cheat yourself.
No.
I worried about that first time I heard the name.
Well, there's actually another band called the Cheats. I did not know that.
Only one Dan Vapid.
Apparently, they were not very happy about it, and they even sent me a angry message one time, and I was like, it was a mistake, guys. I didn't know. He's like, well, couldn't you Google it, or I'm like, well, I just kind of try to explain the story and everything. And
right.
I said, there was time when there was two Rancids, there was two Heartbreakers, it's two Subhumans, and like, it didn't
as
matter.
long as their lead singer is not Dan Vapid, I don't know what they got to complain about. Could I mention one other thing I forgot when you asked what's been going on or what's kind of upbeat for me is it also managed to re-release a whole bunch of music the last couple of weeks, which I never thought might get heard again. Thanks to Don Giovanni Records, your fellow New Jerseyans. I guess you're not in New Jersey anymore, but
no, I'm Seattle.
But your origins are South Jersey,
Will
right?
forever be in New Jersey. Yes.
Yeah, well, Don Giovanni Records, which has also released both my books and my old band, The Lookouts.
Very familiar.
This last month, they've re-released all of my old Potato Men music, which had been basically out of print for quite a long time, and which I'm pretty proud of, and I'm really happy to have it. It's honestly getting a much better reception now than it did the first time around. I think because back in the 90s, when we released it on Lookout, people were like, what, this isn't punk? What is it?
Right.
Now they were expecting a new Lookouts or something. Now it seems to be getting a much better response, and it's kind of like a lot of the sort of Smith style music without the cranky old man fascism and stuff. So and some of it's more Buddy Holly and Hank Williams kind of stuff too. But I'm just really happy that it's getting heard. And I remember about 2 weeks ago sitting there thinking, I just typed up a little bit on my computer and pressed send key, and wow, I just released a record. We found a bunch of outtakes and some unreleased recordings, and within I wish it was that easy back in the day. You could just bang bang release a record like that, and then, in between your chores for the day. But Joe at Don Giovanni obviously did most of the work. But,
I'm glad that it's getting revisited, because I'll admit it, I didn't like it when it first came out, because I would buy the Queers, and then I would buy a Pansy Division. It's like the Potato Men does not sound like them.
Check out our the Queers covered one of our songs for their Move Back Home album.
Really? Which one was that?
The one That Girl on the Move Back Home album.
Yeah.
That's a Potato Men song, and if you check it out, you can hear our version of it, which honestly I think might be a little bit better. But then, we practiced it, and they basically learned it in about 20 minutes, and then recorded it. But to return the favor, we recorded a queer song, which a little bit different kind of version of it, a little bit more doo-woppy and stuff. But I think some people might like it. It's the song Deborah Jean.
Oh, you did Deborah Jean?
Yeah.
Wow. I want to say, I think I saw the Potato Men cover Deborah Jean once or twice, or maybe even more than that. I could have swore maybe I'm just imagining this, but
Yeah, I think you might be. No, I'm not sure if you played it live.
No, you didn't play it live back then?
Not really. No, we were just getting ready. We were rehearsing for our new album, and we just went in the studio and just recorded a bunch of demos.
Oh, I see. Okay, so
somebody wanted their compilation. It was one of those really small compilations with only a few hundred copies, but so we gave it to him, and other than that, very few people have ever heard it until now.
Yeah, well, I'm going to revisit it, and it's weird, Larry, because I just started a new band called the Potato Men. So I guess that we're just going to go head to head, like Dan and the Cheats.
This conversation's like way too.
As long as it's worse than the Potato
I'm
Man.
on a carb diet here. None of this potato stuff, okay?
Well, thank you both for as we both all of us mentioned it was kind of a dark evening.
Oh yeah, the worst.
The worst, just another worst on a series of worsts.
I don't know if any of you guys believe in the power of prayer or meditation or just good vibes or whatever that heck you want to call it. But anybody who does, this is a time.
Yeah. No, I agree, Larry.
I do believe in the power of the vote. So, let's definitely do that.
I'll take all the above.
Yeah. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your weekends. Larry, a joy to talk to you. Again, loved your book. Dan, I've got like 10 of your records behind me.
Awesome.
Have always been a fan, and it's really been a joy to talk to both of you.
Thanks for having me. It was fun.
As always, for the last 30 some years, always been great to see you and to interact with you, Dan. And
likewise. Good to talk to you as well, and good to meet you, Zach. I don't think I've ever met you before, but
no, we haven't. Okay. And please, if you ever have something you want to say, send me a message. I'd love to have both of you back. It was a joy to talk about you.
Anytime you want, anytime. Yeah.
Awesome.
All right.
Well, have a great weekend. Try to find some joy. Larry, pick up 3,000 new words in Chinese and Turkish.
That's so interesting.
That is great. I love that people. Some people
about that at some point, Larry.
Seriously, that's awesome.
That is really cool.
Thanks everybody else for watching. Please hit the share button. Facebook.com/Burns and Holla. YouTube.com/Burns and Holla. This podcast will be up later tonight. Anywhere that podcasts are found, iTunes, Stitcher, blah, 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 all that. Thanks again, guys. Hope to talk to you again soon. See ya.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
See ya.